friends, welcome back to Food Prep Guide. Imagine with me for a second harvesting twice as many tomatoes this season with half the typical problems. If that sounds too good to be true, I thought so too until I started researching and testing different tomato growing techniques. When I first started growing tomatoes, I planted the seed and treated the plant like every other plant in my garden. But now I know better. Tomatoes are different, and they need to be treated as such to unlock their full potential. This isn't going to be usual advice related to mulching or seed starting. Instead, I'm going to share specific methods that have transformed my garden, like the trench planting technique that produces incredibly strong root systems, or how I get dozens of free tomato plants off my existing crop. And one of the tips that I'm going to share saved my entire tomato garden from last year's drought. These are the same strategies that many commercial growers use to get those picture-perfect harvests, but we're going to do it without herbicides and pesticides. If you geek out over this kind of garden talk as much as I do, stay tuned and let's get started. If you would like help mastering tomatoes from seed to table, we do have a Sprout to Supper Guide Tomato Edition available on our website. It is an 80-page guide complete with a video library that walks you all the way through from the very beginning, from seed starting to planting, growing, harvesting, preserving, and more, including recipes for serving it at your table. If you're interested, that link will be down in the description box below, labeled Tomatoes, a Sprout to Supper Guide. You click that link and it will take you straight to our website. If you're new here, we invite you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming tutorials on gardening, food preservation, food storage, and more. Tip number 1 is to plant in a trench. Most gardeners plant tomatoes by digging a deep hole and burying the stem, but there's a better way called trench planting. Instead of digging straight down, dig a horizontal trench about 4 to 6 inches deep. Remove the lower leaves from your tomato seedling, leaving just the top 2 to 3 sets. Lay the plant sideways in the trench with only the leafy top sticking out above the soil line. This method works because tomatoes can grow roots all along their buried stem. With trench planting, you're creating a massive, shallow root system that accesses more nutrients and water from the topsoil, where most of your amendments and fertilizers are going to be, at least in the very beginning. But as those roots continue to grow, they will stretch down deeper into the soil and get access to all the nutrients that are down there as well. I have tested this side by side with traditional planting, and the trench-planted tomatoes consistently produce larger harvests and stronger plants. They're also more drought-resistant because their widespread root system can take in more water. When you're ready to plant, just dig your trench, lay the plant down, gently bend the top portion upward, being careful not to break the stem, and backfill with soil. Within days, that horizontal stem will begin shooting out new roots and giving your plant an incredible foundation for growth. Tip number 2 is to plant peas wherever you plan on planting your tomatoes. This is a companion planting strategy that many gardeners miss. Plant peas in early spring wherever you plan to put your tomatoes later in the spring, whether that's in ground, in a raised bed, or even in a container. Peas are nitrogen-fixing plants, meaning they work with soil bacteria to pull nitrogen from the air and convert it into a form that plants can use. When pea plants die back, they leave behind those nitrogen-rich roots in the soil, which is exactly what your tomatoes need to feed off of. Start your peas as soon as your soil can be worked in the spring. You could even grow a fall crop if your climate accommodates that. When it comes time to harvest, instead of pulling the whole plant out, cut them at the soil level, leaving the roots in the ground. Then plant your tomatoes in the same spot. This natural fertilizing system gives your tomatoes a nitrogen boost right when they need it the most during their initial growth phase. The timing works out perfectly in many climate zones, with peas finishing just as it's time to plant tomatoes. I found that tomatoes planted after peas grow faster in the first month and develop darker green foliage, which is a sure sign that they're getting plenty of nitrogen. Best of all, this method costs nothing and improves your soil year after year, at least if you save seeds from your previous year. Otherwise, it might cost you about $3 to buy a packet of pea seeds. Okay, tip number 3 is to feed your plants with calcium and magnesium as soon as they start flowering. Blossom end rot, which is those dark sunken spots on the bottom of tomatoes and other fruit, it's not actually a disease. It's a calcium deficiency, and it can ruin your harvest. The solution is CalMag. which is a calcium magnesium supplement you can find at most garden centers. But many new gardeners make the mistake of using it too late after they have already spotted signs of blossom end rot and then trying to treat it. The key is to prevent, and that is all about timing. In my garden, I start applying CalMag as soon as the plants begin flowering. This ensures that calcium is available precisely when the fruits start forming, which is when they need these minerals the most. Mix the CalMag according to package directions and apply every 10 to 14 days. On my calendar, I put 2 weeks just to make it easy to remember, and you want to do that throughout the entire fruiting period. I'll link my favorite brand of CalMag below. I have found this simple timing adjustment reduces blossom end rot by over 80% in my garden, and less blossom end rot means I'm bringing more tomatoes into the house for processing. Remember that once a tomato develops blossom end rot, that individual fruit cannot be saved, so prevention is everything. Tip number 4 is to clone tomatoes for free plants. If you need more tomato plants, but you don't really want to pay more on them, you can actually clone your existing plants for free. When you prune your indeterminate tomatoes, the tall vining types, you don't want to throw away those suckers. Those are the small stems that grow between the main stem and the branch. If you can picture a capital letter V, and then picture a stem coming up directly in the middle of that V, that middle stem is the sucker, and it'll produce an entirely new plant if you give it the right conditions. Choose suckers that are 4 to 6 inches long at least, cut them with clean scissors, and remove the lower leaves and place them in a glass of water. The glass of water should have be at least 3 to 4 inches deep. Change the water every couple of days, and within a week, you'll see roots forming all up and down that stem. Once the roots are about an inch long, they're ready to plant into the soil. And actually, I've even heard from several people that tomato suckers work great planted directly into the soil, like snip it off the plant, put it straight into the ground, totally skipping the water jar phase. I haven't personally tried that yet, but it sounds like it works. I've heard plenty of people doing it. I use this technique to get a second wave of tomatoes in late summer. When my spring planted tomatoes are in full production, I clone them, and by the time the original plants are fading, my clones are just hitting their stride, extending my harvest all the way through to my first frost day in the fall. Tip number 5 is to water deeply and not overhead. Many gardeners water a little bit every day, and while it's fine for most things, it's not great for tomatoes. Instead, you want to water them deeply, but infrequently. Tomatoes develop the strongest root systems when they have to search for water. When you water lightly every day, the roots tend to stay kind of shallow and at the soil line, and they become dependent on constant moisture. So here's how to do it. You want to water thoroughly once or twice a week, applying enough water to penetrate 6 to 8 inches deep into the soil. Now, since most of us can't really visualize that or see that, it's going to equate to approximately 1 to 2 gallons per plant each watering. If you're watering in a raised bed that does have a solid bottom, you will want to be careful with how much you put in there because you could flood out your bed. But if you're planting in ground, growing in ground, you're not really going to overwater using this method. I mean, don't sit there and drench 5 gallons worth of water onto each plant. But as far as 1 gallon or 2 gallons, it's not going to matter. You can also use a soaker hose or a drip irrigation to deliver water directly to the soil and not on the leaves. This prevents disease and ensures that water reaches the roots without wasting a drop. But most of the time, I just use milk jugs and pour water directly at the base of the plant. During the hottest part of summer, you might need to increase this to twice weekly waterings on your tomatoes. I'm not talking about the rest of the garden, specifically tomatoes, but resist the urge to water more frequently when it comes to tomatoes. Your plants will develop deeper roots and become more drought resistant as a result. I've also found that this method not only saves water, but also reduces the fruit from splitting. Okay, tip number 6 is don't prune determinate tomatoes. For most plants, the specific variety doesn't change its care all that much, but that is not the case with tomatoes. You need to know if your tomato is a determinate or indeterminate type. Determinate tomatoes, often labeled as bush or patio varieties, grow to a predetermined height, flower all at once, and then set their fruit. These include tomato varieties like Roma, San Marzano, and most of your paste tomatoes. Unlike indeterminate varieties, determinate tomatoes should not be pruned, except maybe to remove diseased or damaged leaves so that the disease doesn't spread. When you prune a determinate tomato, you're literally removing branches that would otherwise have produced fruit for you. The only exception is maybe removing a sucker if we happen to have one form at the very bottom of the plant in its first few weeks of life. After that, leave them alone. So before you reach for those pruners, check your plant tags or seed packets. If it's a determinate variety, you might want to put the pruners down and let the plant just do its thing. And just in case anyone is brand new to growing tomatoes, if it is an indeterminate variety, then you can prune to your heart's content without worrying about messing up your harvest. Okay, tip number 7 is to pick tomatoes before they're actually ripe. Most people wait until tomatoes are fully red on the vine before harvesting, and I chalk this up to grocery store marketing of vine-ripened tomatoes. But commercial growers know a secret, and that is tomatoes picked at the breaker stage, or also known as the blushing stage, when they're first starting to show color, have a far better chance of making it to the consumer in a pretty and delicious state. When tomatoes begin to show the first blush of color, usually light pink or orange, they're already developed the flavor that they're going to have. Picking at this stage and letting them ripen indoors protects them from pest, cracking, and sun scald, and of course disease. You want to place your almost ripe tomatoes on a windowsill or countertop somewhere out of direct sunlight. Last year, I completely got overwhelmed with how many tomatoes we grew. We grew the most tomatoes we've ever grown. I had them in boxes and boxes just laying in the floor of my dining room, nowhere near any sort of sunlight, and they ripened just fine right there in the box on my dining room floor. So don't worry about that if you don't have a windowsill large enough to hold your tomatoes. The key is that the controlled environment indoors is going to prevent quality issues that are going to happen outdoors. This technique is especially valuable during periods of heavy rain or extreme heat, when outdoor conditions can cause tomatoes to split or develop rot spots, and of course, it keeps the pests from getting to them before you have a chance to. I have found this method gives me nearly 100% usable fruit compared to 70% when I used to leave them all to ripen on the vine. The flavor difference, in my opinion, is absolutely negligible, and sometimes the indoor ripened ones actually taste better because they haven't been stressed by all the outdoor conditions. Okay, tip number 8 is to consider force ripening your tomatoes before frost, and I mean on the vine. That might seem kind of counterintuitive to what I just said, but bear with me, you'll understand in just a second. In most climates, the end of tomato season comes very suddenly with the first frost, but you don't have to lose all of those green tomatoes left on the vine, and that is typically what happens, is that there are a lot of green tomatoes on the vine, and then boom, your first frost happens and they're ruined. If you do about 2 to 3 weeks before your expected first frost date, stop watering your tomato plants completely. This is going to send stress signals to the plant, and it's going to start them ripening their existing fruit as quickly as possible. And then 1 week before your expected frost date, take a shovel and stab it into the ground near the plant's roots. The idea is to damage the roots, but not completely sever all of them. This will cause the plant to direct all of its remaining energy into ripening the attached fruit. For individual green tomatoes, you can wrap them in newspaper or a paper lunch bag with a ripe banana or an apple. These fruits release ethylene gas, which triggers the ripening process even faster. Otherwise, just give it some time, they will ripen. Check them every few days and remove any that show signs of rot. Using these methods, I typically can get another 3 to 4 weeks of harvest after my growing season officially ends. It's like getting a bonus month of harvest for very little extra work, which is pretty cool if you ask me. Okay, friends, I hope these tomato tips prove helpful to you. What I love about these methods is that they are all practical, low cost, and based on understanding how tomato plants grow. No fancy equipment needed, just some smart gardening. That's all for today, and we'll see you next time. Bye!